Okay, so today we've got a special webinar. My name is Martin O'Neill. I'm the head of marketing for North America for Rostify. Um, the context behind this webinar is that we've been listening to a lot of the conversations that we've been having in the non-profit sector around automation and in particular AI. AI is changing the face of the non-profit industry, and in a sector that is so synonymous with the human element and connecting to a community, it's super important that we understand how to balance the efforts of AI and the benefits of AI and automation with the one-to-one human touch contact that you should have with your community, and I'm including the volunteering program within that. So we recently produced a white paper based on exactly this subject. We looked at organizations in North America that do a terrific job when it comes to understanding the human element as being super important to the process of delivering service, but under the kind of context that the teams, the volunteer managers, and the workforce are under incredible pressure to deliver that service, and also the burden that the admin has on those individuals, the workload that is put on their shoulders. So, in this half an hour session, we're going to cover quite a lot. I like to think of these as sort of like bite-sized learning experiences. I'm going to be pulling two or three, several key points from the white paper. I'm going to dive into some of the case studies from a position of having worked with these organizations too, and try and impart some insight into what those organizations, and I'll get to who they are in a moment, are doing to mitigate some of the pressure that they feel under at the moment in delivering service, but also not losing the human touch. I want this to be as interactive as possible, so there will be opportunities to have like questions back and forward, maybe just share an opinion or two. But we've got 30 minutes, and I want to rattle through all of it in as cleanly and concisely as I possibly can. So we're going to break it down like this. This is what the 30-minute session looks like. I'm just going to frame what the scale versus heart paradox actually is. I'm going to highlight the four key challenges that the volunteer sector, specifically around like non-profits and service delivery organizations, are going through at the moment. I'm going to really lean into two case studies. So these are the two organizations that I've been working with a lot, which is the Alzheimer's Society of British Columbia and Yukon, and also End Overdose. These are two charities I care deeply about. I've worked with them. I've met a lot of their team. I know what they're about, and I know that the challenges that they're going through, and I want to share some of the insights from recent interviews and conversations we've had with them. And then I also want to show examples of where you can automate to lift the burden off your team, but without losing the human element of it. And then we've got time for any questions. So a little background first of all. My name's Martin. I've been working with Rostify for the last 4 years. Rostify are effectively a volunteer management platform. We're used by non-profits, sporting associations, citywide programs, local government, the world over. So Australia, Europe, and in North America, United States and Canada. We work with some truly remarkable organizations, particularly in the non-profit sector, that do amazing work. Some of the organizations that we work with has contributed to a lot of the content that's in the white paper. That is sort of what the overarching theme of this webinar is. They're up on the screen at the moment. So, just to point out a couple, British Heart Foundation do remarkable work, and we've got a lot to learn from what they've done in terms of automation, which I'll get to in a moment. And then the Alzheimer's Society of British Columbia and End Overdose have contributed towards two case studies within that as well. Effectively, Rostify's mission is to connect communities to causes that they care about. So we help organizations streamline their operation by creating a central view of volunteering, while at the same time, so that's what the admin has, is a CRM database that's safe, secure, and easy to use, and to create automations and workflows in. But the other end of that is the volunteer experience. And that's where some of the real magic happens, which is where the volunteer portals and the engagement comes in. I'm going to get to that a little bit later, but we are going to focus on the real stories from the customers and the sector in general. So the sector in general, I frame this as like the paradox, right? So how do you manage growing compliance requirements and then the administration burden that your team is carrying without creating barriers between you and your community? So how do you avoid breaking those connections that you've got when you've got so much to put in to protect your program from data leaks and screening and all these automation, all those steps that you've got to put in before someone volunteers with your organization can feel like 100 hurdles. So how do you smooth that out and still have the robustness that you need in order for it to be secure, because that's super important, but also the human element of it too. Why this is worth the investment is recent data, and I've seen this in lots of different sources. They've worked out that the average USD value of a volunteering hour is about $36. So if you have a few hundred volunteers and they're volunteering for you regularly, week in, week out, that's a significant amount of value that they're adding to the community and to your cause and to your people. So it is worth the investment in those individuals. But you already know that. I'm preaching to the converted here. I often get asked, is volunteering declining? Now, this is what you've got on the screen here is Canadian data, but it is indicative of the Western world, it's US and in Europe. The short answer is there's huge demand for volunteering. However, the amount of volunteering hours has been steadily declining. So that tells you that in terms of like a supply and demand issue, there's plenty of demand. Now, the supply is in a chokehold because a lot of programs don't quite align with the modern day living. How do I access your volunteer program? Can I get it on the go? Is the onboarding or the application process just as easy as booking time as in a gym session or something like that? That's what the expectation is of the volunteering world. It's not, that expectation is not being met by the organizations, and that is creating the friction. People want to do it, they don't want to jump through all the hoops that you may put in front of them in order to do it. I know that sounds quite blunt, but that is the scenario. So the question we've got to ask ourselves as a sector is, how do we just make it easier, but without opening ourselves up to risk and creating problems? So the scale of the goal is large, right? So we've got to motivate people. We've got to make people feel like they can get involved. What we know for certain is that volunteers, particularly in your sector, particularly in the healthcare sector, they're not necessarily motivated by a logo. They're motivated by a personal involvement with perhaps the mission that you're on. So they don't necessarily want to volunteer with Alzheimer's Society. It could be that their family has been deeply affected by Alzheimer's in some way. So there's already an emotional connection, which is why it is really important not to ignore that human element, which is why it doesn't matter if we create a service, and I say we, I mean the collective we. If we're creating volunteer programs that are as easy to access as Netflix, you still need that human element. They still need that connection to the cause, that empathy, to get people involved and to want them to spend time with your organization. So balancing that is really important. I want to touch on something very, very quickly, which is the talent drain that I'm seeing from the sector. I believe we're losing very good people from the healthcare sector to the private sector because we're asking volunteer managers, coordinators, and heads of volunteering to work with systems, software, and processes that is leading to burnout, is leading to people having to work extra hours, spin many plates, wear many hats, not really lean into the reason that they wanted to, lean into their super skill. I've said this on many a podcast and many a webinar, is I don't believe anybody chooses to be ahead of volunteering for a charity to fill out spreadsheets. You do it because you love the human element of it and the people element of it. The scale in which you're asked to collect data and meet compliance, screen, and properly onboard and train is creating this bottleneck, and that's creating a real friction, a real problem for people in the sector. So I think we owe it to the sector in general to create better experiences for the volunteer managers and the heads of volunteering themselves. So we can do that through automations, through AI. So all of that robotic AI unrelated to the human stuff will just free people up to do the bit that they wanted to do. Here are the 4 challenges as I see them in the healthcare sector, specifically around volunteering. So data silos, attrition rate. So does somebody just join and then never come back? Compliance without slowing the whole process down, and burnout with our teams. I've touched on that as we've gone along, but those are the 4, right? So let's start with this first one, data silos. So I think a good question to sort of pitch to the group as a whole, nice and early, is how, if the fundraising team asked you to present like your top 100 volunteers sorted by the number of hours that they've done or the engagement that they have, would you be able to do it? Would you be able to serve that information up? I think for a lot of volunteers, volunteer programs, you'd really struggle with that. Like, how would I share that information safely? Do I even have that information? Can I report on it? And this is crucial. Yeah, I mean, we work with many organizations that have seriously accelerated their fundraising potential just by opening that out to other services within the same organization. These silos, all they do is create problems for other parts of the organization. They want to achieve their goals, and you've got these great volunteers, these super engaged people, and I don't know whether it's for a protective notion of that intuition to hold on to that data through fear of it escaping, that perhaps hinders people from maximizing the fundraising potential. There are excellent programs such as Blackboard's Razor's Edge NXT that integrates with many volunteer management software platforms such as Rosterify, that allows that two-way communication really easy. Having that oversight over the whole organization, not only does it free up potential for more fundraising, it just allows the whole of the organization to get a visibility over volunteering, and it finally have a seat at the table as well. If everybody has visibility of what's being done, it gets talked about more. If it gets talked about more investment gets put your way. The second challenge, the one and done attrition. This is something we see time and time again. I'll jump straight to a solution on this. I've worked a bit with End Overdose. They're a fantastic customer of ours, and they, in short, what End Overdose do is they effectively train volunteers to go to festivals and offer helpful, it's not just helpful, it's literally life-saving advice to festival goers and young people about the dangers of drug overdose, and also what to do in an instance where you worry that someone might be overdosing. They've literally saved lives, and they've grown their program exponentially. Now, the point that I need to get across with this is they are across 50 states, and they have a standardized training format for all their volunteers. So, and all their volunteer coordinators are all volunteers. So if you take a step back for a moment, how do I coordinate 50 different locations, all being managed by a volunteer themselves, and ensure that all those people are correctly trained and they keep coming back time and time again? Because there's no point putting all that effort in to growing a chapter, having an individual go through all the training and build up those volunteer base, for them to just leave and restart. We know that one of the stats that was on at the start was the attrition rate is around about 35%. That effectively means for every 3 people that you've onboarded, 1 person is going to drop out. That is a lot. That is an awful lot. So where End Overdoses have met this challenge is that they've really built a community around their volunteer program, and they've understood that if you can feed information back, whether that's just through really basic things like the portal that they use for volunteering and the messages that pop up with how many people trained, how many lives effectively saved, that gets people bought into the cause. Just reward and recognition schemes fed into it too, to say, Lucy and Emma went to this festival. We really appreciate them as volunteers. They're our volunteer of the month, and having that available on the platform, on the website, and consistency with the branding and the look and the feel from website through to VMS through to email to actually on the day is really important, and it significantly helped them grow their volunteer base from 900 to over 2,500 now. The third point, compliance that doesn't slow down volunteering. So here is a picture of me with two wonderful individuals that work at that volunteer at a Blessings of Hope, which is a wonderful food bank that's just based in the beautiful Pennsylvania countryside. They supply thousands of tons of food every single week to the sort of eastern coastline of the United States. They do absolutely wonderful work. And what they do really, really well is that they are able to screen and to train and to onboard really smoothly with a checkpoint process. And they have a community. I have to think of the best way to word this. So it's an Amish community that's there, and they have a need to cater to some of their community that might not want to be as involved in tech as some other volunteering groups. So they have to make that as streamlined as possible, because that is a real challenge for that particular community. So it is possible to do both. It is possible to have the training, the compliance all built into a program without scaring your volunteer base. If this Amish community is able to do it for a food bank, your program is able to do it for your service too. Some of the key questions that they established when I met with this team, I've got them on here. It's 3 questions I'd like to ask you and for you to think about really is, how much do you really need to ask up front when you're putting that form? The amount of times that I've gone on a volunteer with us website, and the list is endless with that form straight away, page 1, all of that information, that can be very off-putting. I mean, straight away your attrition rate for filling out that form is going to drop off a cliff after you get 6 or 7 different fields that you're asking. So really have a think about, what is it that you really need to know up front? Can you ask some stuff a little bit later down the line or closer to when they're going to start? That's particularly important if you do have to do a screen background check or criminal record check where there may be a cost involved. There's absolutely no point doing criminal record checks upfront and early when people haven't completed the initial part of their onboarding and their sign up process. You're effectively paying for somebody who won't go on to volunteer. Do all roles require equal screening, and do you even have a visibility of your attrition rate? So there's a reading skills charity that we work with called Literacy Pirates. Really neat pirate themed kids learning experience. Effectively, it's an after school club for volunteers. They help kids who English might not be their first language, help them read English and learn. And they do wonderful work. They're a small organization, only a couple of hundred volunteers, but they understand when you spend any time with their team, they know exactly what points in the application funnel do people fall out of that process, and they go in and they tweak it. It's almost like a sales funnel. They know, when are we losing that sale, when are we losing that person, like what have we said to them at that point? Can we reorder some of the things that get done in order to create more likely that they would finish the process. The fourth and final challenge, coordinator burnout. Now this is a really, really big one, and I think if the pace of work continues to accelerate the way that it does, in the amount of admin that's involved in volunteering as your program grows. So as the demand for the service, as we've seen stateswide, that demand for services have really blown up, especially over the last sort of 12 to 18 months. That just creates more admin. And it's not just a worry on if demand for the service is increased, can we get volunteers? Take a step back. If demand increases and you have to manage more volunteers, do you even have the systems in place to be able to do that? There is a human cost to that too. I've mentioned Alzheimer's Society here because they've managed to grow across 19 different regions, like regional communities, and they've done some really great work recently, and they've mitigated some of this burnout by automating quite a lot. But I'm going to do a little bit more of a dive in on them because I did actually meet with their team not so long ago. There is an excellent case study on our website that you can check out that has a breakdown of some of these elements on here. But they manage about 650 volunteers, and they do it over multiple locations. What they've effectively done is that they've made their team feel they can scale without hitting a wall, without burning out. They've got the literal quote from them that's on our website is, "We don't have any fear anymore on scaling our program." Now that two things. One, it's wonderful to hear that they're doing that with us and that their program is growing. And the second thing is that's so exciting for them that they can now think bigger picture. The fact that they are thinking bigger picture and they're already planning to scale it shows an incredible amount of foresight. I mean, a lot of organizations with the pressures that they're under to deliver day by day, they can't really even think a couple of years down the line. And here are Alzheimer's Society of British Columbia and Yukon already planning to scale 3, 4, 5 years down the line. So they've greatly reduced the amount of day-to-day admin through automations and the use of AI. They've really improved the way that they handle data and this secure nature in which they hold on to volunteer data and share that within other services as well. And they've managed to broaden out they've managed to use new tech, new like apps, portals, online services with a volunteer base that is predominantly an older volunteer base. And there was a bit of a worry at first that introducing some of this stuff might create a bit of friction. Maybe they don't want it. I've always volunteered this way. All I have to do is just email Tim and he lets me know that I can be there on Thursday. That's not sustainable. So they knew that. But if they bring in these other systems, do you alienate your demographic? That hasn't happened at all. In actual fact, that they've done regular surveys over the last few months or so, and they've had amazing responses, highly satisfied volunteer base. That's really encouraging. It's encouraging because they can grow their program, and it's also encouraging because they are able to they're able to hold on to the people that they've got as well, which we know is super important. The second case study is Maddie. Maddie is the Chief Operating Officer for End Overdose. Now, I talked a little bit about End Overdose before. I wanted to come back to them because I do think that they're a wonderful charity. I just want to pull out a couple of key impact metrics purely from a position of they've leveraged automation and AI without losing the heart. So what is the impact of them doing introducing workflows, automated workflows that fire out email communications, that encourage people to book onto shifts, that when they do click on a shift, it just triggers emails and communication without somebody behind the scenes having to do it. So they've reduced their admin by about 50%. That frees up their time to spend more time building like corporate partnerships and going and expanding these chapters. Like Maddie, for example, is able to grow the program because she's able to spend a bit more time, developing new regions to spread their message and get involved. 75 chapters across 29 states is remarkable considering the size of their team. They're only able to do that really because they've managed to automate and streamline the work that they've done. It's not just in the US. This is a global picture, by the way. What we're talking about today is a global challenge. Increased demand with the need to automate next to the need to have that human element. two organizations, just very, very briefly on here. British Heart Foundation, you probably tell from my accent, I know a fair bit about them. They're a wonderful charity. They're basically healthcare research. They research into heart conditions, and some of the ways that they do that is through fundraising, and some of the ways that they're able to fundraise is through thrift stores, secondhand stores, and action teams. So people that go out and raise money, and that gets put towards the research. Now, pre-introducing automation, VMS, Rostify, it would take them about 42 days to properly get a new starter from interested to ready. Now that's cut in half now, and they do an awful lot of screening, onboarding, and training. That 21 days might seem like quite a lot for some organizations, but we're talking about an organization that does put their volunteer through many, many paces before they get to start. My favorite stat is 125% growth in multi-role volunteering. That means that they're not just doing the one shift Thursday afternoon that they go and do every single time. This is multiple roles, so they're doing other things to support. Maybe they'll join the fundraising team, then work at the thrift store, then several other roles as well. And that has come from them having an online portal presence and being able to market that, like, using all their channels, their social channels, to feed back to that portal with all the opportunities on. So an individual just builds a profile, a volunteering profile, and everything I've just explained there is automated, but that has freed up the volunteering time, volunteer management time, to spend more time with those volunteers when they are on site and when they are doing the fundraising, the action teams. And then the Sydney another wonderful charity, the Sydney Children's Hospital Foundation. So beforehand, they were doing a hell of a lot of background checks and screening on spreadsheets, effectively, like manual work. That is unsustainable, especially for a hospital that has to do a lot of background checks and screening. So it's revolutionized the way that they've operated, and of all the sectors that need that human connection and to spend less time in spreadsheets and worrying about the data and more time with the communities, the patients, the parents, this is it. And we've seen wonderful feedback from that team there on how to do that. They're only able to do remarkable work that they do by automating and by moving away from spreadsheets to more of like a holistic one location VMS system. So the trick here is knowing what you're supposed to automate and what you're supposed to keep human. And some of it is kind of obvious, but I think that it's really important to understand that pivot and understand where is the best place to put your efforts into. So do automate, document creating, document chasing, do automate shift management, shift allocation. Are you using a system that can basically identify what that profile, what that individual said as their preferred preferences, and then ring fence that person, so that when you know that an opportunity is available, the system automatically marries the principles, the preferences of that person with the opportunity that's available. I mean, that saves so much time, and it's streamlined and it feels slick. So that's exactly the sort of thing that should be automated. What shouldn't be automated is the initial welcome message when someone joins. Maybe that is something that you manually do. Maybe the automated email comes out from the brand, but the actual team themselves sends a personal email to say thank you. When they've completed their very first shift, there absolutely should be an automated message that says thank you and reminds them of the next shifts coming up. But there should be a human element of, if you're there, go and see them. If you're not, reach out to them and say thank you so much for doing that first shift. And when they hit milestones as well, 50 shifts, 100 shifts, 100 hours, all of those things, it's being seen and it's being heard. So where you can automate is the things you get grind and stuck with, like the admin. Where you shouldn't automate is that you see me, you hear me, you appreciate me. A high-tech solution is needed a high-tech solution is needed when there's high touch involved. So here's just four excuse me, here are four very, very quick things that technology should help you improve. So admin permissions, custom workflows, automated workflows, and advanced communication. If anything falls within those categories, that is the perfect remit for automating within your system. So you have to ask yourself, does the current processes that we have at the moment, are they able to manage admin permissions? Can I create workflows myself? Can I automate the onboarding journey and the onboarding experience? And will it send automated communication to my community? Just about to finish up because we've just hitting the 30-minute mark. Here are 3 things that I would like you to sort of present to your team or to think about as for your team, or even as part of your strategy for the remainder of the year or into next year. Consider this: map your current journey and highlight what could be automated and what couldn't. So think about your pivot again of the current process that it takes someone to do a volunteering shift with you, new and maybe recurring. What can be automated and what needs a human touch? Automate where your current pipeline is. I talked a little bit earlier about literacy pirates and how them being able to understand where people drop out of the process. Do you know that? And can you see that? Can you see the attrition rate for your forms and your sign up? Speak to your team, and in your team, I'm including volunteers themselves. Get feedback from them about the current process. Do they feel like they have enough connection with you? Is something missing? And then, if you're able to, speak to our team too, because we would love to hear from you. We'd love to hear more about your program. We'd love to hear how many volunteers do you currently have? What's your current sign-up process? Would you like to see a similar process from an organization that works just like you do too? And perhaps there's ways that we can share some of the learnings that we've had from the hundreds of organizations that use Rosterify week in, week out with you to see if there is a better way for you to present your program, increase service delivery. And if you're interested, there's 2 QR codes on the screen. These are just free resources that you can download. The top one is the healthcare volunteer program workbook. It's kind of what this was about, really. It's like the framing of everything was in this 30-minute webinar. There's a lot more. Obviously, there's a lot more to gather from the workbook itself, and you can download that on there. The second one is something that we released this year, and it's been hugely popular, which is the Volunteer Recruitment Playbook. Again, another free resource. Just can download it. It gives you tips and advice on how to improve your recruitment, improve your retention, and make it sustainable. You know, like, what do you need to put in place to keep this going? That's everything from me. Thank you so much for joining me on this webinar. We will be sharing this recording too, so this will be available to view on demand. And that's it. Thank you very much.